Hello everyone, welcome to the second term of our Future World Fellows program. This is our second term, we've completed our first term. First term had 4 modules, module 1, module 2, module 3, 4. And module 2, we are starting with, in term 2, second term, we're starting module 5. And the theme of this module 5 is focusing on policy analysis and public affairs writing. Policy analysis and public affairs writing. The purpose of this module: we believe that public policy affects every citizen, yet much policy communication is inaccessible to ordinary people. Much of public policy communication is inaccessible to majority of the citizens. So the Future World Fellow must bridge the gap between technical policy and public understanding. So this model equips a fellow to equips you to interpret, analyze, and communicate public policy with clarity, with balance, and practical relevance. What are the learning outcomes? By the end of this module, you should be able to explain what public policy is and why it matters. You should be able to distinguish between policy reporting from policy analysis. You'll be able to analyze policy proposals using structured frameworks, and you'll be able to write evidence-based public affairs articles. Of course, you will be able to evaluate the likely impact of public policies on citizens and institutions. Finally, you will be able to communicate complex policy issues in language that ordinary readers can understand. So let's begin by taking this reflection. Now, if a government announces an important new policy today, how many citizens will truly understand what it means for their daily lives? I repeat this question. It's a reflection for us, those of us who are in the media. If a government announces an important policy today, how many ordinary citizens will truly understand what it means for their daily lives? Now, this is where the issue is. Somebody sometimes needs to break this thing down for them. Somebody needs to articulate it, explain it, and bring it to a way it will connect with their daily life experience. So these are issues to be discussed, interrogate on it, and review it, and find out who will do it, and those who are going to do it, are they qualified enough to do it? Do they understand even the policy said before they can interpret it and explain it to the people? So the role of the Future World Fellow is not simply to report policy, but to help society understand its implications. And the reason is simple. Every public policy has public implications. Every public policy has public implications. And if it has public implications, somebody has to explain those implications to the people so that they can understand and make adjustments where they need to make adjustment. What then is public policy? What is public policy? Public policy is a deliberate course of action adopted by government or institutions to address public issues. This is a very simplistic explanation. Public policy is a deliberate action of government or deliberate action adopted by government or institution to address public issues. In other words, public policies addresses public issues. That is it. Public policies addresses public issues. Now, let's take some examples of public policies. Talk about education reforms, healthcare policies, taxation. These are examples of public policies. You hear about taxation, new tax regime, housing initiatives, environmental regulations, employment programs, digital economy strategies. Some of these are things that happen in the society. Government brings in a policy or series of policies to address public issues. Without policy, there's nothing government can do. In other words, government rule by policy. So, policies are not merely government documents. They influence businesses, they influence families, they influence schools, they influence communities, and they influence the future of the nation. So policy is so powerful. Policy is instrument with which government governs. Without policy, government can do nothing. So let's think of one public policy that has affected your life. Can you think of one public policy that has affected your life as a private citizen? Can you think about anyone? How did it change your opportunities? How did that policy affect your responsibilities or daily expenses? Because let's not look at this from very far distance. Bring it to yourself. What particular government policy that has changed the way you see things? Your spending capacity, your liberty, your freedom. So these are the things we are looking at. So let's get into public reporting policy and analyzing policy. Reporting policy versus analyzing policy. Many writers only report the government announced. The government has announced, the government has said, the government has issued a statement. Now, many writers just report what government has announced. Now, thought leaders go further. They ask, why was the policy introduced? They ask, what problem is it trying to solve? They also ask, who benefits from this policy? Thought leaders also ask, who bears the cost? What implementation challenges exist? And how will success be measured? Government never answers these questions. What government does is to issue out a policy. They may have answered this question when they were developing the policy, but they never explained this to the people. This is where policy reporting comes in. Policy analysis comes in. You come to ask the question, why was this policy introduced? What problems is it trying to solve? Who benefits from this policy? Who bears the cost? Because for every policy, there are people who are going to bear the cost. Government never tells you who bears the cost of their policy. They may tell you those who are going to benefit, but they never tell you those who bear the cost. That is where reporting comes in. So this is what it is. There's an announcement of policy. There has to be an explanation of policy. There's an analysis of this policy, and then follows public understanding. Without explanation and analysis, public understanding is not clear. Now, this is the way it follows. So if you know of any recent public policy, and I'll ask you to identify any of them that you know. Check the facts. Identify the facts in that policy. What are the assumptions? What are the missing questions that policy did not ask or has not answered? What are the potential consequences of that policy? Take a look at it, not because you want to find fault with it, but you want to analyze it. You want to bring it, pieces it, and feel how everything comes together. That is what we mean by policy analysis and policy reporting and policy analysis. Let's quickly move on to the future world policy analysis framework. As a future world policy analysis framework, I'm going to show you some few things you're going to use to introduce the policy framework, what we call the policy framework. Now, in this policy framework, P will represent problem. P will represent problem. Let's talk about what issue is the policy addressing. I'm talking about framework for policy analysis. That's what I'm trying to get. As a future world fellow, there is your policy analysis framework. And that policy analysis framework, P means represent problem. So you're going to be asking, what is the policy addressing? What is this policy? What is it addressing? O means objectives. What objective or what outcomes are intended? What are the intended outcomes of this policy? L means likely impact. Impact means who benefits, who may be disadvantaged. Impact could be positive, impact could be negative. So likely impact of this policy, who are going to benefit from this policy, sometimes to what extent, and then who are going to be disadvantaged, and also sometimes to what extent are they going to be disadvantaged. I means implementation. Implementation means, can this policy realistically be carried out? Can this policy be realistically carried out? and what resources and institutions are required to carry out the policy. I means implementation. Then C means consequences. Consequences means what intended and unintended effects will arise. For every policy, there's what we call unintended consequences and intended consequences. So what are the intended and unintended effects of this policy on the people? What are the things that are likely going to arise for this because of this policy? Then why in the framework is your own assessment. You will now have to offer an evidence-based conclusion with practical recommendations based on your analysis. You cannot and your analysis based on what you have done so far through the policy framework analysis, policy analysis framework, POLICY. Y is now your analysis, your own assessment, not analysis, assessment. So you now offer an evidence-based conclusion based on what you have seen so far in your analysis process. So that is what we call the future world policy analysis framework. The future world policy analysis framework. And let's move into the writing public affairs articles. How do you write public affairs articles? Strong public affairs articles should include some few things. Number one, it should have an opening. Opening means present the issue clearly. Let the issue be clearly stated. Then context. Explain why it matters. Provide opening, provide a context. That means explain why this particular issue matters. Number three, analysis. Analysis means interpret evidence and competing viewpoints. These are the evidence that provided. These are the competing views and all those things. So that's the analysis. You hear journalists say, analysts say, others say, but these people say. That's you're analyzing and you're bringing competing viewpoints into the discussion. Then you take a look at public impact. Show how citizens, institutions, or sectors are affected. When you're writing articles, you must show how citizens, how institutions, and other sectors are affected. For every policy, it affects different sectors. So your ability to take a look at those who are going to be affected and bring them out, and probably sometimes they don't even know. Somebody needs to inform them that this is what's going to happen if this policy is implemented the way it is. That's why sometimes when policy analysis talk more about the policy, which government probably knows or did not know. You see, sometimes government will backstrap on some policies because some people have gone behind to analyze it and bring out the very negative consequences of that policy on the citizens. Sometimes government may change that policy. And sometimes government may not even have known, or government may know but don't want to tell the public. So these things happen. So now you give your own recommendations, offer practical, balanced suggestions as a public affairs. You are writing a public affairs article. You offer a practical, balanced suggestion, and then you conclude. Leave readers with a constructive insight or question. You could ask them a question. Assuming this policy is implemented, what are you going to do? What are you going to do with your family? What's going to happen to your education? Do you think this should carry on? You ask them questions and leave them with the answers. Now, let's take a look at common mistakes in public policy writing. Common mistakes in policy writing. We are saying that there are some few things you must avoid if you are going to be writing policy articles. Number one is that avoid political bias that's disguised as analysis. Sometimes some analyses are political biases. People have taken a stand based on the political affiliations. So they come to do policy analysis, but it is politically biased. So you as a fellow of future world, you must not be political biased when you are analyzing a public issue, a public policy issue. We say avoid excessive technical language. There's no point writing too many technical language that ordinary people will not understand. Be as simple in your English construction, be as in your use of language, in your term, anytime you use, you must be able to provide explanation to it so that when somebody reading, he doesn't have to be consulting a dictionary or consulting internet to have understand what you're saying. So avoid unsupported conclusions. If the conclusions they are making are not supported, just leave it out. Also, Avoid personal attacks. Don't attack the government. Don't attack the institution that did. Attack the issue. Attack the policy. Don't attack the institution. Let's say it is the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Don't attack Minister of Foreign Affairs. Attack the policy. Don't attack Minister of Justice. Attack the policy. Puncture the policy with facts and figures and all of that. Don't attack the minister is in charge and all of that. These are the problems that we have. Instead of attacking the issue, you attack the person who developed it. That creates problem. So we say avoid ignoring implementation realities. Don't ignore implementation realities, because for every policy there are implementation realities. Don't ignore it. Don't ignore those realities. Bring them to the fore. Let's talk about them. So, policy writing should illuminate, not intimidate. Policy writing should illuminate and not intimidate. In other words, it should not intimidate those who develop the policy, or intimidate those who are going to suffer or benefit from the policy, but it should rather provide light, so that individuals be able to make choices or make adjustments based on what is on ground, whether they accept it or you don't accept it. So it's not for you to tell people not to accept a policy. Your own is to provide information to enable them make their own choices. That's why you are more like a go-between. You don't tell the citizens to rise and attack the government, but you provide the citizens enough information that will enable them to decide what to do. That is the role of the policy analyst or a communicator in that sense. Okay, so let's take a look at policy analysis through the lens of Fledism. Of course, you know, what we teach here, we have a Fledism leadership philosophy. So we teach our courses and our program from the lens of Fledism. And we used to say that Fledism is a philosophy that believes that public leadership is basically, the primary purpose of public leadership is to enhance the quality of human life and nothing else. The quality of human life. That's what we believe that Fledism is supposed to do. So Fledism leadership asks a deeper question when it comes to public policy. We say, does this policy improve the quality of human life? That is the question we ask as Fledist thinkers. We say we evaluate policies not only by the economic outcomes, but also by human dignity, institutional strength, ethical leadership, social inclusion, long-term sustainability, and public trust. These are the things that we use in evaluating or assessing the impact or the relevance or the usefulness of public policy. Not just because they're going to generate economic benefit. You can have economic benefit, but the social contract is destroyed. The social cohesion in the community is destroyed because you want to do economics. You want to improve the economic condition of the people, but you are destroying their livelihood in terms of their social cohesion and sustainability of their lives. So, and the trust they have among themselves. So those things are not good. So the future world fellow should therefore ask himself, and you should ask yourself, does this policy strengthen institutions? Does it expand opportunity? Does it encourage responsible leadership? And does it improve the lives of ordinary people? When we keep saying ordinary, we are talking about majority of the people. And we are saying that every policy must be developed to enhance the quality of human life. If not everybody, but at least majority of the people. Any policy any government is implementing that is not targeted at enhancing the quality of the majority of the citizens, that policy is not good. It is only for the benefit. If it's only for the benefit of the minority elite, then that policy is not good and must be attacked and be called to what it is, because public leadership is for public interest. Let's take a look. So these are the way this is. These are the way it is. And for you as a person, as a future world public policy analyst or writer, these are things you should take a look at. So and I have an assignment here which I would like you to do, and using policy framework. You know our policy framework, what P is, what O is, what L is, what C is, and what Y is. You're going to use it, and then work a little, do some work. And what the work you're going to do? I'll show you. Explaining public policy to the public. You're going to use it to explain public policy to the public. Use it to explain public policy to the public. How are you going to do that? Are you going to use public policy, the policy public framework, to explain public policy to the people? Now, select a recent government or institutional policy from your country or another African country. Any recent government or institutional policy from your country or another country. Now, prepare a public policy analysis. Prepare a public policy analysis that describes the policy, that explains the problem it seeks to address, that applies the policy framework, that assesses its likely benefits and challenges, discusses its implications for the citizens, and provides practical recommendations. That means using 6-point agenda or 6-point framework, you're going to be able to write what I'm trying to explain to you. So what am I saying? What are these things I'm talking about? It's an assignment. You can do it. You can try it, because I'm saying the task is that select a recent government or institutional policy from your country or another African country. Now, prepare public policy analysis. How are you going to do it? First, number one, describe the policy. Explain the problems that policy seeks to address. Apply the policy framework to it. Assess the likelihood or the likely benefits and the challenges of that policy. Discuss its implications for citizens, and then provide practical recommendations. So if you have any source or sources you can use to support your writing or the work you are doing. So that is it. So when we come back, we will continue from there. But for now, there are some recommended reading I would like you to have. Development as freedom, the public and its problems. You can read selected policy briefs from African governments, regional institutions, and independent policy research. That's some of few things you can do on your own and read. Now, in closing, I'd like to say this to you. Public policy is where ideas become decisions, and